bite that I have, and which is this whole controversy about India's GDP per capita almost looking like it's crashing as against Bangladesh's, and we are sort of level terms with Bangladesh at this point. And I remember we were talking about the economic situation when we were hanging out in private, and you'd said that it's a cause of concern. Is this the red flag that you were mentioning that we'd see sometime soon, or is this just some out of proportion news story that's not doing justice to the substance?
Look, it's a symptom. It's still not the red flag yet, but it's an indicator of where things are heading. Because see, you've got so many mandates now, you've got two absolute majorities. And the constant refrain we hear about not going in for economic reforms, as in, hard, painful reforms. Because if it isn't painful, it's not a reform. Okay. At the same time, jhatka pain, like what you saw with demonetization, isn't actually a reform. That's just jhatka. Okay? Because the goat dies at the end of jhatka or halal, whatever you want to call it. The goat is dead. There is no growth to be had from it. This isn't like building up your muscles, which takes pain.
Right.
Bakra mar jata hai. So this is the issue that we're looking at. Now, Bangladesh, if you look at it, some of us have been saying this for almost 7, 8, 9 years, that ever since Sheikh Hasina took over and brought in all her reforms and all of that, especially her industrial reforms, Bangladesh was going to go way ahead of us. You read Mihir Sharma's book, Restart, Last Chance for the Indian Economy. He's actually got a chapter dedicated to Bangladesh and why Bangladesh was about to overtake India. Okay. So we've known this for a very long time. We've postponed our economic reforms for so long. Since 1991, we have not had proper economic reforms in this country. We've had tinkering under Vajpayee, fairly decent tinkering under Vajpayee, a bit more haphazard tinkering under Modi. My issue with Modi's policies are that they're all jhatka policies. Whereas good policy is like a perfume. When they say you test a perfume, they say you always spray it at your under your ears, and you go for a walk for half an hour, either on your wrists or your ears, and you go for a walk for half an hour, and you have to walk. Why? Because what happens is there is the first scent that hits you, and then a perfume is essentially a toxin, much like economic reforms. It is a toxin to the system.
Right.
It produces a reaction, and that reaction takes about 10-15 minutes to develop. And then you have the mature fragrance of the perfume that comes after about 30 minutes or so. Reforms are like that, right? It's a toxin to the system in the sense in that it forces a reaction. Okay. And what happens is it is the second order and third order effects of policy that are the most important. The first order is the jhatka that you get to see, which is queues at banks during demonetization and things like that. That is not a reform per se. What happens after that? That is the reform. Okay. So you see this also with GST. For example, and with demonetization, we didn't know what was going to happen. With GST, at least, all of us were predicting that if you've got 4 slabs, knowing the kind of bureaucracy, lower level bureaucracy, the extortionate, rapine bureaucracy you have in this country, they are going to use it to extort businesses. And smaller businesses aren't going to have the accounting manpower to sit and work all of this out. So the extortion is going to get worse. So you look at my friend Yusuf Unjawala, who runs the Defense Forum of India. He also runs a house supplies store. And every single time, every month, some new guy comes, demands a new rate on something, a plastic wash basin tap. Just because it's gold plated, he decides it's a luxury plastic, not even metal. A plastic tap, because it comes with that cheap gold plating that wears off in about
6 months.
a month or so maximum. 6 months would be a luxury product. But that wears off in 1 month. He now wants to charge it at luxury product rates. And for the arbitration, Yusuf has to go all the way to Mangalore, wasting 2 whole days, 6 hours drive, whatever, up for the hearing, then do the hearing and then come back. And all kinds of rubbish like this. And there isn't even a system where you can catalog this thing and sort these things out.
Huh.
Now they're planning on reducing it to a 2 slab, but even in the 2 slab, you're going to have these problems. See, this kind of, we love being verbose. And verbosity adds to complexity. Verbosity reduces comprehension in the general population. So, there was this tax on restaurants. I think this was in the UPA time. It said 7% on something or 12% on something. Now, it means the same thing, 7% on something. Why do you have to word it in 2-3 different ways when the amount you're charging is the same? So people didn't understand what it was, and some restaurants were charging 12%, some restaurants were charging 7%, and then they had to come up with a corrective thing. So, this is the kind of rubbish that you have. This bureaucrat-driven policies where they masturbate off to how much complex words they can put into one law.
Right, yeah, right.
And it just goes all downhill from there.
Is it like an... Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Just curious. Is it to say that there is this masturbatory verbosity, this unneeded complexity that gets added for the sake of just, feeling competent rather than being competent? Is that like an observation we have from the outside, or is it truly that incompetence is being masked by verbose complexity? Like, is that really the case that ये लोग बैठे हुए हैं वहां पे genuinely कि यार इसको और complicate करते हैं?
It's both. So it's incompetence on the one hand of the political executive, that is the elected politicians, to not see that verbosity is either being used to undermine policy or to mask the bureaucrat's incompetence. Okay. So if the bureaucrat is doing it, this is what bureaucrats do. But if you are not seeing it and you think the bureaucrat is Raja, and you are allowing him to bog you down in micro detail. So, there's that very famous episode of Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister, I forget which, where the Prime Minister is given 3 boxes full of work. And the operative section is in the 3rd box right at the bottom, which you'd only reach at 1 or 2 in the morning, so you wouldn't pay attention to it. This is what they do.
Right.
Okay. If you haven't been able to see through that, and if you're going along with this useless verbosity, shame on you. After 6 years, if you haven't wisened up to the game, shame on you.
Right.
You can no longer blame the Babus. It is your problem.
Right. And so what are these magical industrial reforms or economic reforms that Sheikh Hasina has done in Bangladesh that's like speeding her economy like that?
Scaling up, labor laws. Labor laws was something that this government wanted to introduce in its first term within the first 6 months. And then Rahul Gandhi came up with the Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, and the Sarkar got completely scared and then backtracked on all those reforms. Do you remember those labor reforms that meant to happen?
I remember Soot Boot Ki Sarkar and whatnot being that thing. Yep.
And what happened here is, this is what Sheikh Hasina did. Here, you actually pay a penalty. If you're going to go from micro to small, small to medium, medium to large, you pay a penalty because the regulatory controls on you, the labor controls on you increase exponentially. Okay. And fine, nobody cares about that. If it weren't such thick, fat regulations, verbose regulations, number one. Number two, so ambiguously written that you can't make head or tail out of it. Number three, highly erratic judiciary, which, the law is the law because of consistency in application. The law without consistency is tyranny. And that is what you have out here. Okay. You don't know when a judge will say, oh, the law may say this, but the bigger law is the dharma of protecting our labor. Therefore, I'm ruling against you. This is a joke. This isn't a judicial system. Okay. You have things like this. At the 4th level, you have the fact that you don't have hire and fire laws. Because, quality control is a function of labor laws. Unless you have hire and fire, you cannot have good quality control. There has to be that accountability. And you can have hire and fire in spite of labor unions. The problem is we have given labor unions too much power. They don't even serve labor. And labor is only that 2% organized labor that you're protecting with these laws. The remaining 98% of labor in India is unorganized, who have absolutely no protection.
Right.
So, and this is the fifth level, that you are preventing 98% of the population from coming into the organized labor market, because organized labor is your, what is the BJP's trade union called?
I have no idea.
I know they all have their own trade unions, C2 and Akhil Bharatiya, no, that is
That's the student union.
They've got a trade union, Mazdoor Sangh, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, I think that's it. All of these things are basically political cartels, where the bosses make money extorting business houses to mere ko paisa do, mere bachchi ka paisa do, and crap like that. And this is how things go about. So, because they have to cartelize in order to, the Communist Party, for example, will control a trade union, which will then, essentially extort the bosses of the business, pretend to extort. And the deal will be that the trade union boss's daughter will get to go to America, while the industrialist can shove all kinds of shit down the throats of the normal laborers. Okay, so it's a completely corrupt, nasty system. And this fellow, this trade union boss, will then go tell the local minister, Pinarayi Ravi, or Vijay, what's his name? I forget now, whatever, something, the chief minister of blah, blah land, that, I can deliver these 10,000 workers, they will vote for you. Therefore, you give me political things, make me an MLA the next time round, la-di-da-di-da. It's a completely rotten system through and through to the core. And, this is what worries me about Modi's incrementalism and about Modi's so-called big ticket reforms, which is that he does not understand deep systemic problems. He doesn't understand that it's a system of systems. You can't change one thing. It's like going to a house that's leaking, or going to a patient who has jaundice and saying, भाई तेरा मुंह बहुत पीला है, ये मैं तेरे को Chanel का फाउंडेशन नंबर 5 देता हूँ, वो फाउंडेशन लगा ले, तेरा मुंह थोड़ा गोरा हो जाएगा. मेकअप से पीलिया जाता नहीं है. ठीक है ना? मेकअप से you can only hide the पीलिया, you can't get rid of it.
Right.
And that is what we're doing. So, I'm quite disappointed. And I don't want to be too negative here. They are doing things. The problem is, it's just not good enough.
Right.
You have to do a lot more. Right. You don't understand how things, and for my own example, 4 or 5 years back, I used to be a really not very good defense analyst, because it's a growth process, of course. I mean, you grow throughout your life. Because I used to think that defense was a silo.
And
my boss at that point, so Samir forced me to, look at education, nutrition, economics, and la-di-da to understand how everything is tied up together. You can't solve your defense problems unless you solve all the other problems as well. Not happening. So, I'm despondent now. This isn't a red flag, it's a symptom. It's going to get worse.